Dr. Eggman, the evil genius scientist, has begun to embrace his evil ways once again.
Sonic! That annoying, cheeky little hedgehog. He's the one who's always ruining my brilliant plans. This time, I'm going to crush him with the power of my scientific genius.
South Island is a treasure trove of gems and ruins. It is also said to be the island where the mystical Chaos Emeralds lay dormant. The Chaos Emeralds are a super substance that gives energy to all living things. They can also be used to create nuclear weapons and laser beams through science and technology. However, no one knows how to attain them. This is because South Island is a moving island, and the Chaos Emeralds exist within the psychedelic distortions that the island creates. Then, one day, danger came upon the island. Dr. Eggman had landed. Dr. Eggman built a huge fortress on the corner of the island and began to develop it.
I'll make sure to get my hands on the Chaos Emeralds, even if I have to dig up this entire island.
Yo, Eggman! You still won't learn your lesson, huh?
After hearing the rumors, Sonic came to investigate for himself. Dr. Eggman's evil deeds were a regular occurrence. He had always foiled his schemes in the past. Dr. Eggman may think of Sonic as his nemesis, but if the past was any indication, he was no match for Sonic. But this time, something wasn't right.
This time, things are different. Take a good look, Sonic. I've turned all the animals on the island into robots.
What?
They'll do exactly as I say. In other words, this whole island is your enemy. This time, the world will be mine.
This is terrible. Go, Sonic the Hedgehog. Everyone is waiting for your help. Let me just get one little thing out of the way. Those of you who've been around the Sonic YouTube space will recognize almost immediately that this sort of thing has already been done before by a number of people. Here's the thing though, I'm incredibly passionate about this series and its characters. I've been sitting on a lot of ideas and research for years. I want to get these out into the world, and to share my thoughts and opinions with people, because I really do think what I have to say is, at the very least, pretty interesting. Is that a little arrogant? Probably, but stick around for a bit, listen to what I have to say, and you can decide that for yourself. I think the very first game is a great place to start, not only because it serves as the literal beginning of the Sonic series, but because there's a lot of concept material and developer interviews, actual in-game storytelling that a lot of people really don't know very much about. It's pretty clear that this video is inspired by other people in this community. I'm not trying to copy anyone or replace their videos. I do have my own opinions, my own research, and just stuff I want to say about these stories. So I'm hoping I can entertain and inform. This is going to be a different kind of video for my channel. No big jokes or memes, not super overly edited, just me with some notes and a mic. Podcasty style video, so I'll be throwing up some reference material on screen for anyone watching instead of listening, but you know, if you're looking for something to listen to while you eat or work or do chores or something, then I've got you covered. Just sit back and enjoy as I tell you the story of Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Mega Drive. Now, of course, this game doesn't have much in the way of a story. Everyone knows that due to hardware limitations, time crunch, the tiny size of the team behind the game, this story doesn't have a lot of substance to it. No cutscenes, no dialogue, just some good old-fashioned gameplay from start to finish. But it's pretty clear to me that this game's lack of story isn't by design. They didn't intend for such a simple story. That little prologue at the start of the video is the Japanese manual for the game. It's intended to set the stage for what's to come. It's like a prologue of sorts. Then in the actual game you go through the levels in the natural space of South Island and watch as it slowly becomes more and more polluted and industrialized. You start off with the very naturalistic green hills and the island's different ruins and temples, and then slowly start to head into some of the cities with Spring Yard and Starlight Zone. At the very end, you get to Eggman's factory, the Scrap Brain. There's a lot of subtle environmental storytelling here, and a pretty clear theme of nature versus technology. You even bust open the enemy robots to release the little animals trapped inside, and at the end of every zone you release a whole bunch of them in these big capsules. It couldn't be clearer that there was quite a bit of thought put into this world, and I want to explore it, but we'll get into that theming a little bit later. Where the immediate appeal of Sonic the Hedgehog lies is in the characters, as everyone knows, and understandably so. These characters are incredibly charming and fun. So let's go through the cast for this game. Sonic the Hedgehog, the titular main character of this series and one with a lot of personality. Everyone can see that he's got quite a bit of an attitude. He's wagging his finger at you from the title screen like a Looney Tunes character. He's tapping his foot waiting for you to pick up the controller, and he's got plenty of cute little doodles in the manual. Between the don't spill your drinks on your console to the little concept sketchog doodles for Sonic interacting with the, different levels and enemy designs, Sonic has a lot of charm and is very clearly inspired by other cartoony rubber hose animal mascots, such as Mickey Mouse and Felix the Cat. Lots of fourth wall breaks here, but not in an overly, intellectual, meta kind of way. Sonic is a fun character who's specifically reaching out to you as the player to join him on his adventure. A lot like other cartoon characters typically do. So much about this game gives me this kind of vibe, even down to the little tiny things like Eggman angrily jumping up and down on the end screen and the good ending, like something out of Pixar's logo sequence. It's lighthearted and it's fun. Games at the time didn't have things like traditional credit screens or character idle animations. They were just the bare bones core essential video game part of the video game. So Sonic Team weren't just trying to differentiate themselves with a cool mascot with an attitude, they were trying to make something that felt alive. This game screams personality, especially for something from the early 90s. But I digress. Let's talk about his actual personality. That's what a lot of people love him for, and myself included. So in the manual, in his character bios, it says that Sonic is a light-hearted, carefree, easygoing adventurer. He's a blue hedgehog with a bit of an attitude. Again, we see that for ourselves when we play the game. This attitude isn't really depicted in a defiant, rebellious, punk teen, 90s American type of way. It's more so just a cartoony mascot with a bit of spunk to him. He's got a bit of a playful nature to him. In Yuji Naka's words, Sonic was intended to be an impertinent, cheeky kind of character, so as to subvert the typical cutesy, cloying aspect of most mascots at the time. Again, super cartoony, and if I'm being honest, I freaking love that. The US did kind of change that when they brought him over, which a lot of people have big issues with, and I can certainly see why. Sonic is meant to be sort of a playful, light-hearted, cartoony kind of character, and then when the US brought him over, it turned into something a little bit more trendy, I guess, with the mohawk and the, it's... I can see why people don't like it. I certainly don't, but you can't argue with success. It did work, but obviously they didn't have the longevity of the character in mind, but, we'll get to that a little bit later. Sonic is the fastest in the land. He has a strong sense of justice, but is irreverent to authority. Again, we knew that. The good guy main character, as you'd come to expect from stuff like this, pretty typical stuff. He's said to be impatient and doesn't like to stand around. That fits his nature as a speedy kind of character, but also adds a little bit to that visible personality he has in the actual game. I quite like that. He's apparently not very detail-oriented and has a short attention span. Again, makes sense. Likes anything fast. I mean, that's part of his whole appeal, again, speedy character. But, as the new Sega mascot for the speedy blast processing power of the Mega Drive, that makes sense too. Surprisingly, he doesn't like to sit or ride in vehicles because they're generally much slower than him, so the bar for what Sonic considers to be fast is rather high, but, again, this is something we'll have to come back to in a later video. There's a lot to dissect here. Sonic is loyal to his friends, but he's a pretty independent guy. He likes to do his own thing. That may be a product of his way of life, being someone who can be difficult to keep up with, but I think this also plays into the fact that he enjoys beauty and nature. We see in a lot of later games and media that Sonic spends quite a bit of time by himself, just relaxing, and I think that's pretty nice. Sonic is pretty street smart, but not very book smart, which makes sense for this type of character. I'm not sure if you've heard of the whole visual learner, auditory learner, kinesthetic learner thing, but different people tend to approach learning in different ways. being such a proactive and impatient person, I think it makes a lot of sense that Sonic is the kind of character that takes more of a physical experiences, way of life type of thing. It works for his character and definitely serves to differentiate him from a lot of other surface-level mascot characters that don't really have this kind of thought put into them. He loves beauty and nature. It makes a lot of sense given that the whole theme of the game is about fighting for the environment. One of his character bios, interestingly enough, actually brings up the fact that Sonic is very fond of the oceans and hates that Eggman pollutes it and takes advantage of its resources. The reason I find this so interesting should be pretty obvious to most Sonic fans. Sonic doesn't really like the water, he's very much afraid of it. He canonically doesn't know how to swim, just sinks like a stone. Yuji Naka thought that hedgehogs couldn't swim, so he made the Labyrinth Zone levels just have you do the same general platforming, but with much slower and more bloated physics. He loves cool music and adventure, whatever. Sonic is said to be a sort of drifter who doesn't really live anywhere. A traveller who wants to see the world, and again, makes sense for his character. I think that's good, it facilitates this game's theme and makes it easy to justify having Sonic go wherever for future games. It also highlights how free and detached Sonic is as a person. He just goes wherever he wants in search of adventure. He's not a do-gooding hero, but has a lot of self-confidence and courage. He's also said to be pretty quick-witted. His shoes are partially inspired by Michael Jackson's boots in the music video for Bad. The kind of color and boot design typically seen on Santa Claus, which that specifically is really interesting to me because it highlights the two biggest aspects of Sonic's identity and personality as a character, what they had when they were making him. He's got that style and flair to him, like Michael Jackson, and he's kind and magical, like Santa Claus. If you stick around, you'll soon see that the Christmas inspiration for Sonic actually goes a little bit deeper. So, that's our main character for this series. He's got a lot of charm and personality, and I think a lot of people don't really get that kind of sensation from him. A lot of the fans for the Japanese side of Sonic seem to see him as this very lax, reactive character, and a lot of fans for the Western side of Sonic see him as a very radical, badass shonen dude with a tood. I don't think either is really right, not 100%, because these perspectives don't capture the balance of these two aspects of the character. They don't get the core of what Sonic is about, which is kind of a fine balance of both. Yes, he's very relaxed and an easygoing character, and yes, he's got a spunky attitude to him. Sonic isn't 100% one or the other. I mean, bringing up Yuji Naka's vision of him once again, Sonic is a cheeky and impertinent character. That's the impression I've gotten from all this research stuff anyway. It's totally cool if you have a different take or preference, I'm not going to fight you on that, but from what I understand, Sonic is definitely more of just this simple, fun character than anything overly intellectual or magical or anything super shonen and badass. Just a fun, cartoony character, and basically Sega's Mickey Mouse. I really do think people overthink his character, which I guess is to be expected from 30 years of inconsistency, but hey, what can you do? That's not to say that there isn't a little more of a, symbolic aspect to Sonic when you, poke down a little bit deeper, but we won't be seeing that kind of storytelling anytime soon, so for now, we're sticking to the basics. Anywho, let's press on to the other major character for this game and series, Dr. Eggman. Eggman is the main big bad, and much like Sonic, he is a delightfully simple character, perhaps even more so given that his character bios for the time seem to be much shorter and to the point than Sonic's. He's a very showboaty, exaggerated showman type of villain, mustache twirling villain, very, very fun. His relationship to Sonic seems to be pretty light-hearted. He's a very proud and arrogant character with a big personality, and they both tend to like messing with each other. I get sort of a Tom and Jerry vibe from them, where they're always trying to one-up each other but never actually want to, end the other. In Sonic Labyrinth, Eggman sneaks up on Sonic when he's asleep, and instead of, killing him, he swaps out his shoes for these super heavy and uncomfortable ones, just to mess with him, I guess. That might just be one of those cases of a spin-off game not taking itself too seriously, but I don't know, I think it's a pretty fun idea. In the game, his sprites are just as expressive as Sonic's, maybe even more so, and it shows that he has a very, very, very big personality. He throws a lot of hissy fits when his master plans are inevitably foiled, and gloats at the player if he manages to succeed. What's especially cool is that he has his own equivalent to Sonic's fourth wall breaking impatient idle animation, where he's tapping his foot. If you take damage while fighting Eggman, he'll look directly at the screen and laugh, like he's making fun of Sonic, or like he's making fun of you as the player for screwing up. But when you manage to hit him back, he looks at you in shock with his mustache all frazzled. That's just another tiny detail that isn't super plot relevant, but does a lot to breathe life into these characters. You have to admit, that's pretty friggin' cool. In terms of written personality, Eggman's whole deal is that he's super into robotics and machinery. He loves machines and wants to basically tear down the world and rebuild everything as machines. What he wants is an artificial world which puts him directly at odds with Sonic as an admirer of the natural world. This is where things get really interesting. So, Sonic is a hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog, exactly what it says on the tin. So, what is Eggman? He's a human, right? Yes and no. In several developer interviews, Yuji Naka states that Dr. Eggman is a representation of humanity as a whole. He's not a man, he's mankind. It's all about machinery and efficiency. His face and branding is everywhere. He just shows up and starts tearing nature down in pursuit of his own endeavors. That's why he captures all the little animals in capsules and stuffs them into his machines, and why the zones you progress through get gradually more and more industrialized. It's really no secret that Sonic at its core is about environmentalism, but getting to peek behind the curtain at the makings of these characters in this world only helps to drive that home even more. I have no doubt in my mind that if they had the time and hardware capabilities, Sonic 1 would have had a much more, prominent, well-told, in-your-face story. But we got what we got, so, Something that was pointed out to me a while back by an Eggman expert friend of mine, actually he did the Eggman voice at the beginning. Eggman's boss mechs and vehicles in the first game are all construction equipment, excavation machines, and just generally crap you'd use to tear the land apart. The wrecking ball, the big box crusher thing, none of it is the kind of robot battlesuit type of boss fight you'd come to expect in this kind of thing. Which is another small detail that just adds to this theme and world building that much more. Anyways, that about covers it for Sonic 1's major cast, keeping it simple and concise with the main hero and the big bad. We do have the little animals Eggman crams into his robots, if you want to count them, but they really serve as more of a collective presence than, standout individuals. They don't have any personal presence in the plot or any kind of, character arcs, they just serve as physical representations and reminders of that nature versus technology theme, and honestly, that's completely fine by me. I guess it's kind of worth noting that the little blue bird is specifically the same bird as the one in Flicky, which is a different Sega game released a couple of years prior. It even has the same name, Flicky, so do with that what you will. Right, let's talk about the setting of the game, as well as other noteworthy places mentioned in the manuals, because I think there's enough meat there to sink our teeth into. So as that little prologue story at the start of the video mentioned, Sonic 1 takes place in South Island, which is a magical place that moves around in the sea and can't be found on any maps thanks to the Chaos Emeralds. In one of the 8-bit manuals it says that the Chaos Emeralds keep South Island afloat, and without them it would sink into the sea. They never really bring up either of those details again, and Green Hill comes back a billion times in the future due to, brand reasons, so I'm not 100% sure if either of these aspects of the island stick around for the current day stories. It doesn't matter. Not to me. This game, what it was trying to do, South Island is a magical place that people don't really understand, and that's supposed to add to this sensation that this place is special. Eggman invading and tearing it down becomes slightly more important to us. It gives us kind of exposition that brings some personal stakes into the mix a little bit, as we're interested in learning more about this weird, funky place, and we don't want to see it ruined. Anyone who knows anything about pop culture will recognize Green Hill Zone, so let's start with that. Green Hill has a very lively and colourful visual identity. The striped grass and the checkerboard dirt have almost as iconic status to them as Sonic and Eggman themselves. As you explore, you'll see plenty of palm trees and flowing water, which gives that sort of tropical island vibe that the manuals illustrated. The sunflowers are perpetually rotating, which is pretty cool, I think. Some interpretations actually say that they're dancing, which that's so cool, man, I love that. The terrain here is pretty noteworthy too, though it's certainly not exclusive to just Green Hill Zone. There are plenty of slopes and loop-de-loops and these funky looking, I'm not really sure what they're called, just these winding, snaking burrows on the side of these hills and cliff faces that spit Sonic out at the other end, like something you'd see in a pinball table. Obviously these are primarily here for gameplay purposes, but this is canonically how this world looks and functions, so it's pretty important to lay the groundwork early on. It also makes it so Sonic is very much in his element here, you know, as a living, playable pinball, Sonic's whole gimmick is using the terrain to build up speed. Obviously a character with that kind of ability excels in an environment built like a pinball table or an amusement park ride. In fact, Hirokazu Yasuhara, the original level designer for the Mega Drive Sonic games, had specifically pointed out that he wanted the levels to feel like amusement park rides, with lots of different activities to do and things to interact with. You've got the roller coaster loop-de-loops, you've got the labyrinth zone water slides and flume rides, and you even have those lava geysers in Marble Zone that spit you up into the air. That game philosophy of just being fun and getting players to have a good time without stressing too hard actually went on to affect the health system of the entire game series going forward, in the form of the rings. A very forgiving health system that allows for people to blast through the levels as long as they've got at least one. But that doesn't mean playing recklessly is good, you're going to want to hold on to them. If you manage to complete a level with 50 or more rings, a big warp ring appears at the end of the level. Jumping in will transport you to the special stage, which is this rotating minigame taking place in a really abstract, psychedelic little pocket dimension. Sonic needs to work his way into the center of the stage, to the eye of the storm if you will, where everything rotates around, which are the Chaos Emeralds. These are the distortions on the island that the prologue talks about, and what Eggman is tearing the island apart looking for. They're pretty standard magical MacGuffins, just these mysterious magical gems that contain a whole lot of power. The manual says that they give energy to all living things, whatever that means, and that through the application of science and technology, they can power super weapons and facilitate Eggman's ambitions of world domination. Interesting stuff. After Green Hill, you get a couple of levels in ruins and temples. The original outline of the game had you moving straight from Green Hill to Labyrinth Zone, but the team thought it was too big of a difficulty spike, so they rearranged the order to be Green Hill and Marble Zone. I find these levels to be very, very interesting from a story and a world-building perspective for a number of reasons. I think the main thing is the symbols present. The different murals and tile sets seem to have different illustrations on them. The ones in Marble Zone have these funky looking tulip flowers, 6 of them specifically, so keep those in mind for later. And the Labyrinth Zone seems to have owls, I think. I mean, these owl symbols were also kind of the totem poles in Green Hill Zone, which has led to a lot of people believing that there was some sort of owl culture living on the island in ancient times. I couldn't find anything on this specifically in the manuals, but for what it counts, the movies took this concept and spun a whole character and culture around it, so, you know, that's pretty cool. The other interesting thing I noticed is the use of elements. So a lot of games, especially Japanese ones, use elements in their characters' powers and stories. You know, the whole air, water, fire, earth type of thing. Obviously in Sonic, everyone already knows that Sonic is very much representative of the wind. But in Sonic 1's levels, there's kind of some interesting applications of this idea. In Marble Zone, you have lots of fire. There are those spitters that shoot fireballs, and pools of lava under the ground, and again, those big lava geysers that play an active part in the level design. Oh my god, I'm not used to talking this much. Then in Labyrinth Zone, you've got plenty of water. You're on those water slides, or actually moving around in the water. Keep this in mind as we move on through the list of levels, because I'm going somewhere interesting with this. Next up is the Springyard Zone. We've moved on from those natural landscapes and archaic ruins into the more urban, city-like locations. Springyard has plenty of those slopes and half-pipes I mentioned before, as well as the springs. Springyard Zone, can you believe it? Lots of bumpers and the like shooting you all over the level, plenty of traps and hazards and looking to knock you down to lower and slower paths, which is a level design idea that will get built upon in later games. Starlight Zone is pretty similar, another city level with lots of slopes and loop-de-loops. It's a pretty short zone, but I think it's worth noting that by now any kind of natural greenery is gone. At least in Springyard you have those glimpses of trees in the background. Here all you get is buildings and construction signs. Interesting. It all comes to a head in Scrap Brain Zone, the final zone in the game. No greenery, but also no cityscape, no signs of life anywhere, just a ton of pollution and machinery. It's a really nasty looking place, and I think the game does a good job of emphasizing how unpleasant and undesirable this kind of mistreatment of the environment really is. What's interesting here to me though are the hazards, specifically the electricity. We also see a return of the fire hazards and an entire chunk of the labyrinth zone. Fire, water, and electricity. The same kind of elements that, they later come back in the form of the elemental shields. Fire, water, electricity. Isn't that interesting? Of course, Sonic gets through Eggman's base and defeats him. If you happen to miss getting the Chaos Emeralds, you're met with a try again screen of Eggman laughing at you and juggling the Chaos Emeralds. However, if you do get all 6 Chaos Emeralds, Sonic heads back to Green Hill and uses them to restore South Island back to how it used to be before Eggman started messing with it. Those funky tulip flowers illustrated in the Marble Zone murals start to sprout again, and in the 8-bit version of Sonic 1, all of the smog clouds and pollution get cleared thanks to the power of the Chaos Emeralds. Pretty on the nose for that theming, but, I'm surprised that a lot of people really don't seem to notice it. But, hey, that's what I'm here for. And of course, you end on a screen of Eggman angrily jumping up and down on the end. So that's largely what we get out of South Island. There are other games that take place here with their own levels and zone ideas, but none of them were produced in-house by Sonic Team and don't really ever get addressed ever again, so not really going to bother mentioning them. There is, however, one other game that takes place on South Island that I find to be kind of a funny example, and take this with a grain of salt. Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car! Yes, I am 100% serious, just hear me out. Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car is one of those arcadey, plasticky little rides you get in shops and malls for little kids. It came out in Japan only, which is why the sprite art and the voice clips don't have any of that Jaleel White Mohawk Sonic crap. In this game, Sonic plays the role of a police officer cruising the streets of South Island, which is already pretty interesting to me. We see towns and cities in some of the zones in Sonic 1, but this is the first time we actually get a glimpse of what life there is actually like. They've got streets, they've got cars, they've got traffic laws, you announce your turns and you wait at red lights so that little animals can safely cross the street, which kind of begs the question, who's driving the cars? Are there just more of the little animals? Do they have driver's licenses? Or do humans live here as well? Who built the roads and the buildings? The main idea here is that you avoid bumping into cars and stop Eggman from being a road hazard. I used to find this game kind of dumb, conceptually. Why is your bad boy, I play by my own rules mascot playing the part of a traffic enforcer? But after looking back at those character bios and really getting into the nitty-gritty of the cartoony vision for the series, I kind of like it now. It's just a fun little thing they can make a little game out of, and it's probably not even canon. That being said, there are interviews with Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima where they highlight how important brand cohesion is to them. They talk about how Sonic Team checks any new Sonic thing before it comes out because they want to preserve Sonic's longevity with his public image the same way Disney do with Mickey Mouse. So having this goofy police car game with these little world-building details, well, maybe not canon or produced in-house, did have to go through them. So at the very, very least, these ideas present in Waku Waku don't outright contradict what they had in mind for Sonic, at least in 1991, so, But at the same time, it could be said for Sonic Eraser, and I refuse to live in a world where Sonic Eraser has any kind of worth. But there are other settings I also want to talk about outside of South Island. Like I said before, Sonic is a drifter who doesn't really live anywhere, and just goes wherever he wants. That's why he's here on South Island. He heard that Eggman was up to no good and came to investigate. So where is he from? In Sonic's character bio, he's said to come from a place called Christmas Island, which has since been retconned. I have a lot to say about this because, if you didn't know, Christmas Island is actually a real-life place. Or actually, 2 different places. Let me give you a brief history lesson, because this sent me down a rabbit hole that I really find fascinating. Okay, first Christmas Island in our world is an Australian external territory in the Indian Sea, about 225 miles south from Java in Indonesia. It's a pretty small island, only 135 square kilometers in area, and as of 2021, contains a population of over 1,700 residents. Given how isolated it is, both geographically and in terms of human involvement, Christmas Island's fauna and flora has a high level of endemism, which basically means the animal and plant species found here are exclusive to Christmas Island. They can't be found anywhere else in the world, so naturalists and scientists find it to be very, very interesting. A couple examples are the appropriately named Christmas Island red crab, the Christmas Island musk shrew, and the now extinct bulldog rat. Actually, a good number of the creatures here are now extinct, sadly, for reasons we'll explore very, very shortly. The island was discovered on December 25th, 1643, hence the name, by Captain William Miners, but it wasn't until the late 1800s that people began to actually settle there. Christmas Island was rich in phosphate deposits, and the British saw an opportunity to begin commercial mining. When the Japanese caught wind of Christmas Island and, the natural resources, they wanted to get in on that too, so in 1942, thanks to development of World War II, Japan launched an invasion on the island. There was a whole war, which I'm not really going to get too into the weeds about, but the long and short of it is, the Japanese won pretty quick, and then the British sort of snuck back in when their backs were turned and recolonized the island. Singapore, under the British rule at the time, administered it and sold it to Australia, also under the British rule at the time. So now the island is owned by Australia, yippee! The thing that I glean from this is that Christmas Island's story is actually pretty similar to the story of Sonic 1. The real-life Christmas Island. Let me make that clear. Our real-life Christmas Island, in the real world that we live in, is the history is somewhat similar to Sonic 1. There is a small, untouched island out at sea, rich in natural resources. Humanity discovers it and tears it apart to obtain those resources, and then that develops into war. I've just straight up skipped a bunch of confusing history just to keep things concise. There's a lot of conflicting information, tons of just straight up people don't know what happened at certain points, which gets kind of grim. The most confusing part, there's another Christmas Island in the world. There's another island in our real world that we live in that has the exact same name. So yeah, I'll link a couple of the resources I used if you find the history interesting, because there is a lot there, but I'm not going to get into it because it gives me a headache. The other Christmas Island is a Pacific Ocean atoll, or a ring-shaped island, very interesting, part of the Republic of Kiribati. Its name is spelled Kirimati, but pronounced Kirsmas, which is derived phonetically from the English word Christmas, but written in Gilbertese. So, the T-I in Gilbertese words, to my understanding, are not pronounced T-I or T, but they're pronounced S. So, Kirsmas. It was formerly grounds for nuclear bomb tests by the British in the late 1950s and the Americans in the early 60s, but is nowadays celebrated for its unspoiled beauty. Again, very interesting, a lot of similarities to some of the material found in Sonic 1. I particularly find the whole military nuclear testing noteworthy, but I won't be getting into what this implies for Sonic's character until my eventual Sonic Adventure 2 video. So, what's the implication? Is Sonic from an island that was warred over for its natural resources, or was he from an island used for military nuclear testing? Honestly, neither, I think. It's probably all just a huge coincidence. I don't think they drew inspiration from these islands, even if contextually it does fit together very nicely. Like I said before, Naoto Oshima really loves Christmas as a concept, and that has influenced not only Sonic, but other things he's worked on too. Nights is a very big example of that. But it is certainly possible. I've not found anything that confirms or contradicts this theory, so it's very possible that Sonic Team did their research and decided to work this real-life island into Sonic's character. Who's to say? And Eggman doesn't really come from anywhere at all. Not canonically, no one knows who he is or where he came from, he just showed up out of nowhere, which makes perfect sense for his character too. I gotta tell you, I'm not used to talking for this long, and using my outdoor voice. My throat kinda hurts. The last thing I want to talk about before we wrap things up, and I guzzle a whole shit ton of strepsils, is the music, because I've got kind of an interesting connection to make again. This might be a bit of a stretch, but it's just such a nice vision that I think really enhances the world feel of Sonic. So, Sonic Team got a pretty popular mainstream J-pop band from the time, Dreams Come True, to compose the music for Sonic 1 and later Sonic 2. Masato Nakamura, or more specifically the bassist of Dreams Come True, composed the jingles, the level themes, all of that good stuff. What a lot of people don't know is that Sonic music has come in different forms, some with lyrics. Green Hill actually got remastered for the 30th anniversary of the series in a song they now call Up on the Green Hill. But that isn't Green Hill's original form, it was remastered. Green Hill originally took up the form of a different Dreams Come True song called Marry Me. I'm not going to play it in the video to avoid copyright issues, though technically I guess I have been playing a version of it earlier throughout the video, but search it up for yourselves. It's very easy to pick up where the Green Hill stuff comes from. The tune is pretty much one-to-one. It's slowed down a little bit, but pretty much one-to-one. This isn't the only Dreams Come True song used in Sonic that secretly has lyrics. The end theme of Sonic 2 is called Sweet Sweet Sweet, which is also a very romantic song. You can certainly tell once you get to Sonic 06, because the credits theme for Sonic's story is an Akon remix of Sweet Sweet Sweet, but in English. This is already pretty interesting just as a little factoid, but I think there's a little bit more to this. What is the definition of romance? These are romantic songs. What's the definition of romance? The Oxford Dictionary lists two meanings. The first being a feeling associated with love that everyone is familiar with, but romance can also apply to a feeling of mystery, excitement, and remoteness from everyday life, a grand fantasy worth defying all common sense in the pursuit. And what is Sonic? A character who ignores the common sense of others around him and lives by his own rules. In that sense, Sonic is a very romantic series. There's a lot of magical and illogical aspects to this world. The Chaos Emeralds and strange land masses that drift around in the sea or float up in the sky, or, little planetoids that appear and disappear without any real explanation. Again, that may be a pretty big stretch. I don't think this is what they were going for. It's just music by a pop band especially. They tend to be very romantic in their lyrics and messages just as a natural thing. And I definitely got this idea of romance from One Piece, so I'm not going to lie to you there. But Yuji Naka specifically chose Dreams Come True for a reason, because it captures his vision for what he wanted Sonic to be. So, in some sense, I think this kind of perspective has its own value. It's a really nice way of looking at the Sonic series. Okay, that's all I wanted to talk about for Sonic 1. There's still plenty of stuff I could get into, like cut content and the whole marketing thing that split Sonic's identity apart between Japan and the West, but that starts to get into more of a retrospective of Sonic 1 type of thing, and I'm not really interested in making videos about that. All I really wanted to do is explore some of the lesser known aspect of Sonic 1's story, its characters, its world building, as a way to lay the groundwork for more future story analysis videos. And if you think I had a lot to say here, then whoo-wee, just you wait until we get into some of those 2000s games. Like I said before, I know a lot of people have done this kind of thing before. I'm not trying to copy or imitate or replace anyone's content, I'm just someone who's very, very passionate about Sonic, and I have plenty of thoughts and ideas about things I really want to share. I'm gonna need to work on my vocal cords though, because I'm dying. And hey, if you made it this far into the video, you're clearly enjoying this too. So, let's chat, talk with me. I want to hear about what you guys think about the stuff I've mentioned. I'm open for discussion, civilized discussion, be kind, best behavior. I know what you Sonic fans are like. Big thank you to Windii Gaylord, Sonic Retro, and schmupulations. Without any of these sources, I wouldn't have had the information needed to make this video. Also, a big shout out to Pariah695, not at all affiliated with him, he's just been making content like this for a good while, and it's been a really big source of inspiration for me. So check him out, okay? I'll be linking all of the pages I used for research and reference material in the description and in the top pinned comment, so give it a look-see if you're at all interested in this kind of stuff. And the biggest thank you of all goes to everyone who directly helped me on this video. Revolution did the fantastic voice for Sonic at the start of the video, and EggInk did the equally fantastic Eggman voice. I also had the help of Rin Staru, who did the thumbnail for the video and read over my script just to make sure it wasn't too wordy. Though, I fear that ship may have sailed. I'll have links to their social media down in the doobly-doo, so please do check them out, show them some love. They are all very awesome. But that's about it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope to see you again next time when we cover the story of Sonic CD. So YouTube doesn't strike this as for kids.